The sharp crack of splitting wood echoed through the Wyoming winter night, when Yates Xander heard something that did not belong to the wilderness surrounding his isolated ranch outside Rock Springs. It was February of 1884, and the temperature had dropped so low that his breath crystallized before his face. But that sound, that faint whimper coming from his woodshed, made his blood run colder than any blizzard ever could. Yates set down his axe against the porch railing and grabbed the lantern hanging by his cabin door. The wind howled through the valley, carrying snow in horizontal sheets that stung his weathered face. At 32 years old, he had lived alone on this property for nearly 8 years, ever since his parents had passed from fever, leaving him nothing but 200 acres of stubborn land, and a silence that sometimes felt like it might swallow him whole. He had grown accustomed to solitude, found a certain peace in the rhythm of his days, the predictable cycle of tending his small herd of cattle, chopping wood, and watching the seasons change through his cabin window. But tonight, that rhythm shattered like ice under a hammer. The woodshed door hung slightly open, swinging in the violent wind. Yates approached cautiously, one hand on the pistol at his hip, because Wyoming was still wild enough that you never knew what might be seeking shelter in your outbuildings. Could be a wounded animal, could be a drifter with bad intentions, could be anything in between. His boots crunched through the fresh snow as he pushed the door wider with his boot, raising the lantern high. What he saw stopped him dead in his tracks. Huddled between 2 stacks of firewood, covered in what looked like a thin cotton dress that had once been blue but was now torn and stained with mud and blood, was a woman. She was shaking so violently that the wood around her rattled, her lips blue, her skin pale as the snow outside. Her dark hair, probably beautiful when clean and dry, was matted to her head and face. Her eyes, half closed, barely registered his presence. She looked like she might be in her early 20s, though it was hard to tell through the grime and the obvious effects of exposure. "Jesus Christ," Yates breathed, immediately setting the lantern down and shrugging out of his heavy sheepskin coat. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered from years of hard labor, and his coat practically swallowed the woman when he draped it around her trembling frame. "Madam, can you hear me? Can you tell me your name?" Her eyes focused on him for just a moment. Fear flickering across her face before consciousness seemed to slip away entirely. Her body went limp, and Yates caught her before she could collapse completely into the woodpile. She weighed almost nothing, he realized with alarm. How long had she been out here? How long had she been running from whatever had put that terror in her eyes? There was no time for questions. The woman would die if he did not get her warm immediately. Yates scooped her up in his arms, his coat still wrapped around her, and carried her through the storm to his cabin. She did not stir, even when he kicked the door open and brought her into the warmth. The fire in his stone hearth was burning strong. Thank God, because he had stoked it well before going out to chop more wood for the morning. He laid her on his bed, the only bed in the single-room cabin, and quickly began assessing the situation. Her dress was damp and would need to come off, but propriety battled with pragmatism in his mind for only a second before survival won. He had clean long underwear and thick wool socks, items that had belonged to his mother and that he had kept in a trunk for reasons he had never quite understood. Maybe some part of him had known they would be needed someday. Working as carefully and respectfully as he could, Yates removed the ruined dress, averting his eyes as much as possible while making sure to check for injuries. There were bruises on her arms, scratches on her legs, and her feet were in terrible condition, cut and blistered from what must have been miles of walking in inadequate shoes. No shoes at all now, he noticed. She must have lost them somewhere along the way. Once she was dressed in the dry clothes and covered with every blanket he owned, Yates turned his attention to warming her from the inside. He heated water and made a weak broth from the beef he had been planning to use for his own dinner, adding a bit of whiskey to it for good measure. The woman remained unconscious, but her shivering had decreased slightly, which he hoped was a good sign and not a sign that she was too far gone. He sat beside the bed, carefully lifting her head and trying to get small sips of the warm broth past her lips. Most of it dribbled down her chin at first, but eventually, some instinct made her swallow. It was past midnight when her eyes finally opened again, truly opened and focused on him with startling clarity. "Where am I?" Her voice was hoarse, barely more than a whisper, but there was strength beneath the weakness. "My cabin about 5 miles outside Rock Springs," Yates said gently, setting down the cup of broth. "You were in my woodshed. I am Yates Xander. This is my ranch. You are safe here." Her eyes darted around the cabin, taking in the rough-hewn furniture, the stone fireplace, the animal pelts on the walls, and finally coming back to rest on him. He saw her register that she was wearing different clothes, saw the moment of panic, and quickly raised his hands in a placating gesture. "I only did what was necessary to keep you from freezing to death," he said quickly. "I swear to you I am not that kind of man, but your dress was soaked through and you would not have survived the night in it." She stared at him for a long moment, and Yates found himself hoping she could see the truth in his eyes. Finally, she nodded slightly, wincing at the movement. "Thank you," she whispered. "I am Felicity Harper, and I think you just saved my life. What happened to you?" Yates asked, then immediately shook his head. "No, do not answer that yet. You need to drink more of this broth, get your strength back. There will be time for talking later." But Felicity was already trying to sit up, driven by some urgent need that overrode her body's weakness. "No, you need to know, in case they come looking, in case they followed me somehow." The fear in her eyes was real and raw, and Yates felt his protective instincts surge. "Who? Who might come looking?" "My husband," she said, and the word dripped with venom. "Or rather, the man who claims to be my husband. The man who bought me like livestock and thought he had the right to beat me whenever the mood struck him." Yates felt his jaw tighten. He had heard of such things, of course. Mail-order brides, arranged marriages, desperate women agreeing to marriages that turned into nightmares. But hearing it from this woman, seeing the evidence in the bruises on her arms, made his blood boil in a way he had not experienced in years. "He will not touch you again," Yates heard himself say with absolute certainty. "Not while there is breath in my body." Felicity looked at him with something like wonder, as if kindness was a language she had almost forgotten. "You do not even know me." "I know enough," Yates said firmly. "I know that no one deserves what was done to you. Now drink this broth before it gets cold, and then you are going to sleep. We will figure out the rest in the morning." This time, Felicity did not argue. She let him help her drink the rest of the broth, and when her eyes began to drift closed again, Yates settled himself in his chair by the fire, his rifle across his lap. He would not sleep tonight. He would keep watch, just in case someone came looking for the woman in his bed. The storm raged outside, but inside the cabin, the fire crackled warmly. And for the first time in 8 years, Yates Xander did not feel quite so alone. When dawn finally broke, pale and gray through the cabin's single window, the storm had lessened but not stopped. Snow continued to fall in lazy spirals, adding to the 2 feet that had accumulated overnight. Yates had dozed in his chair despite his best intentions, but he woke instantly when he heard Felicity stirring. She was sitting up in bed, her dark hair falling around her shoulders, looking more alert than she had the night before. In the morning light, even exhausted and injured, she was striking. High cheekbones, A strong jawline and eyes that were a remarkable shade of green that reminded him of the pine trees on his northern property line. But it was not her beauty that struck him most. It was the intelligence in those eyes, the spark of determination that had kept her alive through whatever hell she had endured. "How are you feeling?" he asked, rising from his chair and wincing at the stiffness in his back. "Better," she said, and it was true. There was color in her cheeks now, and though she moved carefully, she seemed stronger. "Thank you again for helping me. I know it must be strange, having a woman appear in your woodshed in the middle of a blizzard." "Strange things have happened in Wyoming," Yates said with a slight smile. "Though I admit this is a first for me. Are you hungry? I can make breakfast." "I am starving," Felicity admitted, then glanced down at herself at the borrowed clothes. "But I should probably know what happened to my dress. Even if it was ruined, it is the only thing I have." "I hung it by the fire to dry," Yates said, gesturing to where the blue dress was draped over a wooden drying rack. "I will mend it for you if you like. I am fair handy with a needle." "Had to be living alone out here." Felicity looked surprised. "You sew?" "Only when necessary," Yates said, feeling a bit self-conscious. "But yes, I can make basic repairs. Living alone means you learn to do a bit of everything. Now, how do you feel about eggs and bacon?" "I have fresh bread too, baked just yesterday." "That sounds like heaven," Felicity said softly. Yates set about making breakfast, acutely aware of Felicity's eyes on him as he worked. The cabin felt different with her in it, smaller somehow, but also more alive. The silence that usually surrounded him felt less oppressive, even though neither of them was speaking. It was a companionable quiet, punctuated only by the sizzle of bacon in the cast iron skillet and the crack of eggs being broken into the pan. When the food was ready, he brought her a plate in bed, but Felicity shook her head. "I can sit at the table. I am not an invalid." "You are injured," Yates protested, but she was already pushing back the blankets and swinging her legs over the side of the bed. He saw her wince when her damaged feet touched the floor, and before she could take a step, he was there, offering his arm for support. "Stubborn," he observed, not unkindly. "Determined," she corrected, but she accepted his help, leaning on him as she made her way to the rough wooden table. Once she was settled in one of the two chairs, Yates brought the plates over and sat across from her. Felicity ate like she had not seen food in days, which, Yates suspected, might be close to the truth. He let her eat in peace, not pushing for answers, though questions burned in his mind. Who was this husband she had run from? Where had she come from? And most importantly, what did she plan to do now? Finally, when she had finished eating and was nursing a cup of coffee, Felicity met his eyes and said, "You deserve to know the whole story." "Only if you are ready to tell it," Yates said. Felicity took a deep breath. "I came to Wyoming 6 months ago from Pennsylvania. My parents died when I was 19, 3 years ago now, and I had been working as a seamstress in Philadelphia, barely making enough to pay for a room in a boarding house. Then I saw an advertisement. A rancher in Rock Springs was looking for a wife. The advertisement made it sound like a partnership, a new start in the West. I thought it was my chance for a better life." Her hands tightened around the coffee cup, and Yates could see the tension in her shoulders. "His name is Marcus Dalton. He owns a ranch south of town, much larger than this one. When I arrived, he seemed pleasant enough at first. The wedding was quick, arranged by the local preacher before I even had time to settle in. But on our wedding night, I realized the truth. He did not want a wife. He wanted property. Another possession to control." Yates felt his anger rising again but kept his voice calm. "He hit you." "Among other things," Felicity said quietly. "At first I thought maybe if I could be a better wife, if I could learn to please him, he would stop. I tried everything." I cooked his meals perfectly, I kept the house spotless, I never argued with him. But it did not matter. Some men just have violence in them, looking for any excuse to come out. And you finally ran. 3 days ago, Felicity confirmed. He came home drunk and angry about something, some business deal that had gone wrong. He started hitting me, worse than he ever had before. I honestly thought he might kill me this time. So when he finally passed out, I took my chance. I did not even pack a bag. I just started running. I had no plan, no destination. I just knew I had to get away. You walked for 3 days in this weather with no coat? Yates asked, horrified. I had a shawl at first, Felicity said. But I lost it the first night when I had to hide in some brush because I thought I heard horses. After that, I just kept moving. I knew if I stopped, I would freeze. I was trying to reach Rock Springs, hoping maybe I could find help there, but I got turned around in the storm last night. I saw your light in the distance and just headed toward it. When I found your woodshed, I thought maybe I could rest for just a minute, get out of the wind. But I was so tired and so cold. I guess I must have collapsed. Yates shook his head in amazement. The fact that you survived 3 days in this weather in your condition is nothing short of a miracle. You must be one hell of a strong woman, Felicity Harper. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. I surprised myself, honestly. I never knew I had that kind of strength. But fear is a powerful motivator. What do you want to do now? Yates asked. Because you are welcome to stay here as long as you need, but I will not make any decisions for you. Your life is your own. Felicity looked at him with those remarkable green eyes, and Yates saw tears gathering there. You really mean that, do not you? You are not going to try to send me back to him, or tell me it is my wifely duty, or any of the other things men usually say. I have seen a lot of hard things in my life, Yates said quietly. I have seen what happens when powerful people abuse those who have less power. My mother was half Cheyenne. I watched what happened to her people, the way they were treated like they were less than human. I swore then that I would never stand by and watch someone be hurt if I could do something about it. So no, I will not send you back to a man who beats you. I do not care what any law or preacher says about wifely duty. No one has the right to hurt you. A tear slipped down Felicity's cheek and she brushed it away quickly. I do not want to be a burden. I can work. I am good with a needle and I can cook and clean. If you let me stay, I will earn my keep. Let us not worry about that right now, Yates said. Right now, you need to heal. Your feet need tending and you need rest and food. We can figure out the rest as we go. The storm continued for 2 more days, trapping them in the cabin together. During that time, Yates tended to Felicity's injuries with a gentleness that surprised them both. He cleaned and bandaged her feet, applied salve to her cuts and bruises, and made sure she ate regularly. Felicity, for her part, proved to be easy company. She was intelligent and well-read, with opinions on everything from politics to literature that kept their conversations lively. On the 3rd day, when the storm finally broke and weak sunlight streamed through the window, Yates ventured outside to check on his livestock. The cattle had weathered the storm well, huddled together in the shelter he had built for them on the south side of the barn. He fed them and broke ice on their water trough, then spent an hour digging paths through the snow between the cabin, barn, and woodshed. When he came back inside, stamping snow from his boots, he found Felicity standing by the stove, stirring a pot of stew. She had put on her mended dress, which fit her properly now that she was not drowning in his mother's oversized long underwear. Her hair was braided neatly down her back, and she looked almost healthy, though she still moved carefully on her healing feet. You should not be up, Yates said, but there was no real reproach in his voice. I was going mad lying in bed, Felicity said. Besides, you have done so much for me. The least I can do is make you a proper meal. I hope you do not mind that I went through your supplies. Mind, I am grateful." Yates hung his coat on the peg by the door and moved to warm his hands by the fire. "That smells incredible." "It is just beef stew," Felicity said modestly, but he could see the pleasure in her eyes at his compliment. "Nothing fancy." They ate dinner together as the sun set, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of gold and pink. It was during that meal, with the lamplight soft on Felicity's face and the warmth of the cabin wrapping around them like a blanket, that Yates realized something had shifted in him. He had been alone for so long that he had forgotten what it felt like to share your space with someone, to have another person's presence become as essential as breathing. He was falling for her. It was foolish and too fast and potentially disastrous, but there it was. He had known her for less than a week, and already he could not imagine his cabin without her in it. As if sensing his thoughts, Felicity looked up from her plate and met his eyes. Something passed between them, a recognition of the connection forming, and Yates saw his own feelings reflected in her expression. But there was wariness there too, understandable given what she had been through. "Yates," she said softly, "I need to tell you something. I am still legally married to Marcus. I do not know what the law says about running away from your husband, but I imagine there could be consequences. And if he finds out I am here, he might cause trouble for you. You have been so kind to me, and the last thing I want is to bring danger to your door." "I told you before I am not afraid of Marcus Dalton," Yates said firmly. "And as for the legal situation, well, we will deal with that when we need to. But Felicity, I want you to understand something. You are not a prisoner here. If you want to go to Rock Springs, try to start a new life there, I will take you. I will give you money to help you get started. Or if you want to go back east, I will buy you a train ticket. Whatever you want, I will help you. But if you want to stay here with me, then you are welcome for as long as you like." Felicity was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "What if I want to stay, but I am not ready for anything more than this? Just being here, being safe, getting to know you. What if I am too broken for anything else right now?" Yates reached across the table and gently covered her hand with his. "Then we take it slow. There is no rush, Felicity. I have been alone for 8 years. I know how to be patient, and you are not broken. You are healing. There is a difference." She turned her hand under his, lacing their fingers together, and the simple touch sent warmth flooding through Yates' chest. "You are a good man, Yates Xander." "I am just a man," he said. "But I promise you this. As long as you are under my roof, you will be safe. No one will hurt you again." It was a promise he meant with every fiber of his being, though he had no idea how soon it would be tested. 2 weeks passed in a strange and wonderful rhythm. Yates went about his daily chores, tending the cattle, chopping wood, making repairs to the property that he had been putting off during the long winter. Felicity healed, her feet becoming strong enough to walk without pain, the bruises fading from her skin. She took over much of the cooking and helped with lighter chores around the cabin, darning his socks, organizing his supplies, bringing a sense of order to the bachelor chaos he had been living in. But more than that, they talked. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing their histories and their dreams, their fears and their hopes. Yates told her about his childhood, about his white father who had loved his Cheyenne mother despite the prejudice they faced, about the ranch he had built from nothing after their deaths. Felicity told him about growing up in Philadelphia, about her dreams of becoming more than just a seamstress, about the books she loved to read, and the places she hoped to someday see. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, sometimes reading aloud to each other from the few books Yates owned, sometimes just sitting in companionable silence. and slowly, carefully, they began to touch more often. A hand on a shoulder when passing, arms brushing as they washed dishes together. Yates helping her braid her hair when her hands grew tired. It was during one of these quiet evenings, about 3 weeks after he had found her in his woodshed, that everything changed. They were sitting by the fire, Felicity mending one of his shirts while Yates carved a piece of wood into what might eventually become a spoon. The wind was howling outside again, another winter storm moving through, but inside the cabin, all was warm and peaceful. "I have been thinking," Felicity said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence, "about what comes next. I cannot hide here forever as much as I might like to. Eventually, I will need to figure out my legal situation. But Yates, I realize I do not want to leave. This place, this life you have here, it feels more like home than anywhere I have ever been. And you feel like someone I have been waiting for my whole life without knowing it." Yates set down his carving, his heart beating faster. "What are you saying, Felicity?" She set aside the mending and turned to face him fully. "I am saying that I am falling in love with you. I know it is fast, and I know my judgment might be clouded by everything I have been through, but this feels real to me. You feel real to me. And I think, if you feel the same way, we should figure out how to make this work, properly and legally." "I do feel the same way," Yates said, moving to kneel in front of her chair, taking both her hands in his. "I have been falling in love with you since the moment I saw you in my woodshed, shivering and scared but still fighting to survive. You are the strongest, bravest woman I have ever met, Felicity Harper. And I want nothing more than to spend the rest of my life with you if you will have me." Tears were streaming down Felicity's face now, but they were happy tears. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I want that too. But Marcus, the marriage, how do we get around that?" "There are ways," Yates said, thinking quickly. "Desertion and cruelty are grounds for divorce in Wyoming territory. It will not be easy and it might take time, but we can do it. I have some money saved. We can hire a lawyer, make it legal. And in the meantime, you stay here with me. We will tell anyone who asks that you are my cousin from back east, come to help me run the ranch. No one needs to know anything different until we are ready." Felicity nodded, then reached out to cup his face with her hands. "Can I kiss you? I have been wanting to for days now, but I was not sure if I was ready. But I think I am. I think I have been ready for a while." In answer, Yates leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers, gentle and careful, letting her set the pace. The kiss was soft and sweet, a promise of more to come, and when they pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "I love you, Yates Xander," Felicity said. "I love you too, Felicity Harper. And I promise you we will make this work. Whatever it takes, we will build a life together." That night, Yates slept on his bedroll by the fire while Felicity took the bed, as he had every night since she arrived. But something had changed between them, a commitment made, a future acknowledged. And as Yates drifted off to sleep, listening to the storm outside and Felicity's soft breathing from the bed, he felt a contentment he had not known he was capable of feeling. Spring came to Wyoming like a miracle, melting the snow and revealing the green beneath. By early April, the worst of the winter was behind them, and the ranch came alive with new possibilities. Yates' small herd of cattle began calving, which meant long days and sometimes nights helping with difficult births. But Felicity was right there beside him, learning quickly and proving herself invaluable. They had not gone to Rock Springs yet, both of them hesitant to disturb the fragile peace they had built. But Yates knew they could not avoid it forever. Felicity needed proper clothes, supplies, and most importantly, they needed to start the legal proceedings to free her from her marriage to Marcus Dalton. It was a warm day in late April when they finally hitched up Yates' wagon and made the 5-mile journey into town. Felicity wore her mended blue dress and a bonnet Yates had purchased from a traveling peddler the week before. They had agreed on their story. She was his cousin from Pennsylvania, come to help him run the ranch. It was close enough to the truth to be believable, and distant enough from the truth to keep them safe. Rock Springs was a bustling town, grown prosperous from the coal mines and the railroad that had come through a few years earlier. The main street was lined with shops and businesses, and people moved about their business with the purposeful energy of a community on the rise. Yates guided the wagon to the general store first, where they purchased supplies and fabric so Felicity could make herself some new dresses. The proprietor, a kindly older woman named Mrs. Peterson, was delighted to meet Yates' cousin and immediately engaged Felicity in conversation about Philadelphia and what it was like back east. Yates watched Felicity handle the questions with grace and ease, marveling at her composure. If she was nervous about being recognized, she did not show it. Their next stop was the lawyer's office. Josiah Winters was a young man, only a few years older than Yates, who had set up practice in Rock Springs 2 years earlier. Yates had met him a few times and found him to be honest and sharp-minded. If anyone could help them navigate the legal complexities of Felicity's situation, it would be him. Winters listened carefully as Felicity explained her circumstances, his expression growing grimmer as she detailed the abuse she had suffered. When she finished, he sat back in his chair and steepled his fingers. "This will not be easy," he said bluntly. Wyoming has fairly progressive divorce laws compared to some territories, and abuse is definitely grounds for divorce. But Marcus Dalton is a powerful man with influential friends. He is not going to let you go without a fight, especially if he thinks you have run off with another man. "She has not run off with me," Yates interjected. "She is my cousin, here to help with the ranch." Winters gave him a look that said he was not fooled for a second, but he nodded. "Of course. Your cousin. Well, the first step is filing a petition for divorce with the territorial court. We will need documentation of the abuse if possible. Witnesses, medical records, anything that can support your claims." "I have no witnesses," Felicity said quietly. "He was always careful to make sure we were alone when it happened, and I never saw a doctor. He would not have allowed it." "The bruises and injuries she had when she arrived at my ranch," Yates said. "I saw those. I can testify to them." "That will help," Winters said. "But be prepared for Dalton to challenge everything. He will likely claim you are lying, that you are a disobedient wife who ran away without cause. He might even claim you stole from him or some other nonsense. Men like him always do." "I do not care what he claims," Felicity said, steel in her voice. "I am not going back to him. I would rather die." "You will not have to go back," Winters assured her. "We will fight this and we will win. It will just take time and patience. Are you prepared for that?" "Yes," Felicity said firmly, and Yates reached over to squeeze her hand. Winters drew up the initial paperwork, and Felicity signed it with a steady hand. As they left his office, Yates felt both hopeful and anxious. They had taken the first step, but now the waiting would begin. And more than that, Marcus Dalton would soon know exactly where his runaway wife had ended up. They were loading the last of their supplies into the wagon when Yates heard a voice that made his blood run cold. Well, if it is not the little runaway bride." Yates turned to see a man standing on the boardwalk, watching them with cold, calculating eyes. He was in his early 40s, well-dressed, with the kind of polished appearance that came from wealth and entitlement. Marcus Dalton, it had to be. Yates stepped subtly between the man and Felicity, one hand dropping to his hip where his pistol rested. "You must have me confused with someone else," Felicity said, her voice remarkably steady despite the way Yates could feel her trembling beside him. My name is Felicity Harper, and I am visiting my cousin." "Harper," Dalton said with a cruel smile. "That was your maiden name, was it not? Before you became Mrs. Marcus Dalton in a legal ceremony witnessed by half of Rock Springs. Did you think you could just run away and pretend it never happened?" "She ran because you beat her," Yates said, his voice low and dangerous. "And she is not going back. There is a divorce petition filed with the court as of this morning, so I suggest you get yourself a lawyer and prepare to answer for what you did to her." Dalton's face flushed with anger, and for a moment, Yates thought the man might actually try to start something right there on the street. But then Dalton seemed to remember where he was, surrounded by witnesses, and he forced his expression back under control. "A divorce," he said mockingly. "On what grounds? Being a disobedient wife, running away from her legal obligations." "That girl is my property, bought and paid for, and I will have her back. As for you, Xander, I suggest you stay out of business that does not concern you. Interfering in a man's marriage can be hazardous to your health." "Is that a threat?" Yates asked, taking a step forward. "Because if it is, you should know that I do not scare easily. And if you come near Felicity again, if you so much as look at her wrong, you will have to answer to me. Do I make myself clear?" For a long moment, the two men stared at each other, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Then Dalton smiled, a thin, humorless expression. "This is not over, Xander, not by a long shot. That woman is mine, and I always take back what is mine." He turned and walked away, leaving Yates and Felicity standing by their wagon, hearts pounding. Felicity was no longer trembling. Instead, she stood tall, her chin raised defiantly. "Let's go home," she said quietly. "I have said what I needed to say, and I am not afraid of him anymore, not with you beside me." They rode back to the ranch in tense silence, both of them acutely aware that they had just declared war on a powerful man. But when they reached the cabin and Yates helped Felicity down from the wagon, she turned to him and pulled him into a fierce embrace. "Thank you," she whispered against his chest. "Thank you for standing up for me. No one has ever done that before." Yates wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. "I meant what I said. He will not touch you again. I promise you that." The weeks that followed were both wonderful and nerve-wracking. On one hand, life on the ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm. Felicity proved herself to be everything Yates could have hoped for in a partner. She was hardworking, intelligent, and brought a warmth to his life that he had not known was missing. Their love deepened as they worked side by side, building the foundation for a life together. On the other hand, they were constantly aware that Marcus Dalton was out there, plotting his next move. Yates made sure his rifle was always loaded, and he taught Felicity how to shoot, both of them aware that trouble might come calling at any moment. The divorce proceedings moved slowly, as Winters had warned they would. Dalton hired an expensive lawyer from Cheyenne and fought every step of the way, claiming Felicity was a liar and a thief who had abandoned her wifely duties. But Winters was tenacious, and with Yates' testimony about her injuries and character witnesses from Rock Springs, who had heard rumors about Dalton's temper, their case was solid. It was during this time, in mid-June, when the Wyoming grasslands were at their greenest and most beautiful, that Yates realized he wanted to marry Felicity properly, the way she deserved. Not just because it would solve their legal problems once the divorce came through, but because he genuinely could not imagine his future without her in it. He had been thinking about how to propose for weeks, wanting it to be special, wanting her to know how much she meant to him. Finally, one evening as they sat outside watching the sun set over the mountains, he took her hand and led her to a spot on his property that he had always loved. It was a small rise overlooking the valley, with a clear view of the ranch and the wild lands beyond. "This is my favorite place on the whole property," Yates said as they stood together, the warm breeze ruffling their hair. "When I first bought this land, I used to come up here and imagine what my life would be like. I pictured the ranch I would build, the cattle I would raise, the legacy I would leave behind. But no matter how hard I tried, I could never quite picture myself in that future. I was always alone, always separate from the life I was building. And then you stumbled into my woodshed in the middle of a blizzard, and suddenly, everything changed." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Felicity, you have brought light into my life in ways I did not know were possible. You have made this house a home, turned these lonely acres into a place of joy and possibility. And I know we are still waiting for the divorce to be finalized, and I know we have challenges ahead of us, but I do not want to wait to tell you how I feel or what I want for our future." Reaching into his pocket, Yates pulled out a ring. It had been his grandmother's, passed down to his mother and then to him. It was simple, just a gold band with a small ruby set in it, but it was the most valuable thing he owned, not because of its monetary worth, but because of what it represented. "This was my grandmother's ring," he said. "My grandfather gave it to her when they married, even though her people and his people were not supposed to mix. But they loved each other, and they built a life together despite all the obstacles in their way. My mother wore this ring every day of her life, through good times and bad, and before she died, she gave it to me and told me to give it to someone who made my heart sing. Felicity Harper, you make my heart sing. And when you are free, when the law says you can make your own choices again, I want you to marry me. Will you?" Tears were streaming down Felicity's face as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Yates, I will marry you. I would marry you tomorrow if I could." He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Then he pulled her into his arms and kissed her, deep and passionate, a kiss full of promise and commitment and love. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathless and smiling. "As soon as the divorce is final," Yates said, "we will have a proper wedding. I want to do this right, Felicity. I want the whole town to know that you are my wife, freely chosen and deeply loved." "I love you so much," Felicity said, looking at the ring on her finger in wonder. "I never thought I could be this happy after everything that happened, but you have given me a future worth fighting for." They stood there on the hillside as the sun set, wrapped in each other's arms, two people who had found each other against all odds and refused to let go. The divorce was finalized on August 15, 1884, a date that Yates and Felicity would remember for the rest of their lives. Josiah Winters rode out to the ranch personally to deliver the news, his face split in a triumphant grin. "The judge ruled in your favor on all counts," he announced as Felicity and Yates stood on the porch, hardly daring to breathe. "Divorce granted on grounds of extreme cruelty and abuse. You are a free woman, Mrs. Dalton, or rather, Miss Harper again." Felicity let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and threw her arms around Yates' neck. He lifted her off her feet, spinning her around while Winters laughed at their joy. Dalton was furious, of course. Winters continued once they had calmed down enough to listen. "Stormed out of the courthouse making threats. But legally there is nothing he can do now. You are free and clear." "Thank you," Felicity said, reaching out to shake Winters' hand. "Thank you for fighting for me." "It was my pleasure," Winters said. "Too often, women have no recourse in situations like yours. I am glad we could help you get justice. So what will you do now?" Yates and Felicity exchanged a look, and then Yates said, "We are going to get married. As soon as it can be arranged, will you be our witness?" "I would be honored," Winters said. They were married 3 days later in the small church in Rock Springs, with Josiah Winters and Mrs. Peterson from the general store serving as witnesses. Felicity wore a new dress she had made herself from pale green fabric that matched her eyes. Yates wore his best suit, which he had not had occasion to wear in years. The preacher, a kind man named Reverend Hutchins, performed the ceremony with warmth and genuine feeling. When Yates said, "I do," and slipped a second ring onto Felicity's finger alongside his grandmother's ring, he felt like the luckiest man in Wyoming. And when the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, and Yates kissed his bride, he knew that every lonely year before this moment had been worth it, because it had led him to her. After the ceremony, Mrs. Peterson insisted on hosting a small reception at her house, inviting several of the townspeople who had gotten to know Felicity over the past months. It was a modest affair, but it was filled with genuine warmth and good wishes. Even Josiah Winters stayed, regaling them with funny stories from his various court cases. As the evening wore on, and they prepared to head back to the ranch, now officially as husband and wife, Mrs. Peterson pulled Felicity aside. "I am so happy for you, dear," the older woman said, patting Felicity's hand. "When I first met you, I could see the sadness in your eyes, though you tried to hide it well. But now you are positively glowing. That Yates Xander is a good man, and I think you two are going to build a wonderful life together." "Thank you," Felicity said, hugging the woman who had shown her such kindness, "for everything." As they rode back to the ranch in the gathering twilight, Felicity leaned against Yates' shoulder, the wedding ring on her finger catching the last light of the sun. "I cannot believe this is real," she said softly. 6 months ago I was in hell. And now I am married to the man I love, starting a new life. It feels like a dream." "It is real," Yates assured her, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "And it is just the beginning. We have our whole lives ahead of us, Felicity Xander." She smiled at the sound of her new name. "Felicity Xander. I like the sound of that." When they arrived home, Yates carried her over the threshold of the cabin, a tradition he insisted on even though Felicity laughingly protested that she had been living there for months already. But this was different. This was their official beginning, and Yates wanted to mark it properly. That night, they consummated their marriage with tenderness and passion, taking their time to learn each other's bodies, to express physically what they had been holding back for months. And when they finally fell asleep, tangled together in the bed that was now officially theirs to share, both of them felt a sense of completeness that neither had ever experienced before. Their first year of marriage was challenging in the way that all first years are, learning to navigate each other's habits and quirks, figuring out how to work together as a team. But it was also magical. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts. Felicity's skills with a needle became a source of extra income as word spread about her beautiful work, and women from Rock Springs began commissioning dresses and quilts from her. Yates expanded the herd and built a larger barn, and together they weathered the ups and downs of ranch life. There were hard moments, of course, times when money was tight or the weather was brutal or they disagreed about how to handle a particular problem. But through it all, their love remained constant, a foundation they could always return to. Marcus Dalton, true to his threats, tried to cause trouble at first. There were whispered rumors, attempts to damage Yates' reputation in town, even a few incidents where supplies they had ordered mysteriously went missing. But the community of Rock Springs, having learned the truth about Dalton's abusive behavior, largely turned their backs on him. Eventually, he left Wyoming altogether, moving to Montana where his past was not known, and Yates and Felicity could finally breathe freely. It was in the spring of 1886, almost 2 years after Yates had first found Felicity in his woodshed, that she came to him one morning with news that would change their lives again. "I am with child," she said simply, taking his hands and placing them on her still flat belly. "We are going to have a baby." Yates felt his eyes fill with tears, overwhelmed with emotion. "Are you sure?" "I am sure," Felicity said, smiling through her own tears. "I have been feeling sick in the mornings and my courses have not come. I think I am about 2 months along, which means the baby should arrive in early winter." Yates pulled her into his arms, holding her gently, reverently, as if she might break. "I am going to be a father," he whispered in wonder. "We are going to have a family. Are you happy?" Felicity asked, though she could clearly see the answer on his face. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Yates said. "You have given me everything, Felicity. A home, a purpose, a future. And now a child. I love you so much." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Yates worried over every little thing. He made Felicity rest more, took on extra work around the ranch so she would not strain herself, and read every book he could find about childbirth and infant care. Felicity found his overprotectiveness both endearing and occasionally frustrating, but she understood it came from a place of love. In early December, when the first snows were beginning to fall, Felicity went into labor. Yates had arranged for Mrs. Peterson to come stay with them for a few weeks around the due date, and the older woman proved invaluable, calmly talking Felicity through the contractions while Yates paced nervously outside. After 12 hours of labor, their son was born just as the sun was rising on December 10, 1886. He was healthy and strong, with an impressive set of lungs that announced his arrival to the world. When Mrs. Peterson placed the baby in Yates' arms, he looked down at his son's tiny face and felt his heart expand in ways he had not known were possible. "He is perfect," Yates breathed, carefully carrying the baby to where Felicity lay exhausted but glowing in their bed. "Felicity, look at him. Look at what we made." "Hello, little one," Felicity whispered, running a gentle finger down the baby's cheek. "Welcome to the world. We have been waiting for you." They named him James Yates Xander, James after Yates' father and Yates for obvious reasons. Jamie, they called him from the start, and he became the center of their universe. Yates proved to be a devoted father, rising in the night to bring the baby to Felicity for feeding, changing diapers without complaint, and spending hours just holding his son and marveling at the miracle of him. The cabin that had once been too large for one lonely cowboy and had become cozy for two was now bursting with the chaos and joy of family life. Baby clothes hung drying by the fire, toys that Yates carved began to accumulate on shelves, and the sounds of a baby's laughter and cries filled the spaces that had once known only silence. As Jamie grew from infant to toddler, Yates and Felicity's ranch continued to prosper. They added more land, increased their herd, and built a larger house to accommodate their growing family. It was Felicity's design, with proper bedrooms and a kitchen with modern conveniences, but Yates made sure to include a stone fireplace like the one in the original cabin, a reminder of where they had started. When Jamie was 3 years old, Felicity became pregnant again, and this time, she gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah Elizabeth Xander. Sarah had her mother's green eyes and her father's determined spirit, and she wrapped Yates around her tiny finger from day one. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm over the next several years. The children grew, the ranch flourished, and Yates and Felicity's love only deepened with time. They had their challenges, of course. There were droughts that tested their resources, winters that were particularly brutal, and the normal struggles of raising children and running a business. But they faced everything together, their partnership as strong as ever. Jamie, as he grew older, showed an aptitude for ranching that made Yates proud. He was a natural with horses and cattle, patient and observant, with an intuitive understanding of animals that could not be taught. Sarah, meanwhile, inherited her mother's artistic talents and her father's business sense, keeping meticulous records of the ranch's finances and operations even as a young girl. In the spring of 1895, when Jamie was 8 and Sarah was 5, Felicity discovered she was pregnant once more. This pregnancy was harder on her than the others had been, and Yates insisted she rest as much as possible, taking on even more of the household duties himself with help from the children. Their third child, another boy they named Thomas Harper Xander, was born in December of 1895, arriving during a snowstorm much like the one that had brought his parents together 11 years earlier. It was a difficult birth, and there were moments when Yates feared he might lose Felicity. But she fought through, strong as always, and when it was over, she held their new son with the same joy and wonder she had shown with the first two. "He is our last one," Felicity told Yates firmly as she recovered from the birth. "3 is perfect. Our family is complete." Yates, who would have been happy with whatever she decided, agreed readily. "3 is perfect," he said, kissing her forehead gently. "You have given me more than I ever dreamed possible, Felicity. A beautiful wife, 3 amazing children, a home filled with love and laughter. I am the luckiest man alive." As the years passed and the 19th century drew to a close, the Xander Ranch became known throughout Wyoming as one of the most successful family operations in the territory. But more than their success, people talked about the obvious love and respect between Yates and Felicity, the way they worked together as true partners, the way they raised their children with both discipline and affection. Jamie grew into a tall, strong young man who took over more and more of the ranch operations as Yates got older. Sarah became a talented artist and businesswoman, eventually opening a small shop in Rock Springs where she sold her drawings and helped her mother with the sewing business that had never stopped growing. Thomas, the surprise baby, inherited his father's quiet strength and his mother's fierce determination, becoming the peacemaker and heart of the family. On a warm evening in June of 1904, exactly 20 years after Yates and Felicity had married, they sat together on the porch of their home, watching the sun set over the land they had built together. Their children were inside, the sounds of laughter and conversation drifting out through the open windows. Jamie was 21 now, courting a local rancher's daughter. Sarah was 16 and already being pursued by half the young men in Rock Springs, though she was in no hurry to settle down. Thomas was 8, still their baby even though he protested that he was practically grown. 20 years, Felicity said softly, taking Yates' hand. "Can you believe it has been 20 years since we stood in that church and promised to love each other for better or worse?" "Best 20 years of my life," Yates said, bringing her hand to his lips and kissing it gently. "Though I have to say, it has been mostly better and not much worse." Felicity laughed, the sound as musical as it had been when she was 22. She was 44 now, and Yates was 52, both of them showing the signs of a life well lived. There were lines on their faces and gray in their hair, but in Yates' eyes, Felicity was as beautiful as the day he had first seen her in his woodshed, fighting to survive against impossible odds. "Do you ever think about that night?" Felicity asked, as if reading his thoughts. "The night you found me, all the time," Yates admitted. "I think about how close I came to not going out to the woodshed at all. I had enough wood chopped for the night. But something made me go out there, some instinct I did not understand at the time. And there you were, half frozen and scared but still fighting. I knew in that moment, even though I did not realize it consciously, that you were going to change my life. You saved my life," Felicity said simply. In every way a person can save another. You gave me your coat to keep me warm, but you also gave me your future. You gave me hope when I had none, love when I thought I could never trust a man again, a family when I thought I would always be alone. Everything good in my life started that night, Yates. Every single thing. Not everything, Yates corrected gently. Your strength, your courage, your heart, those were always yours. I just gave you a safe place to heal and grow. You did the rest. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, holding hands and watching the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky. Finally, Felicity said, I wonder sometimes what happened to Marcus, if he ever found happiness or if his anger consumed him completely. Does it matter? Yates asked. Not really, Felicity admitted. I forgave him years ago, not because he deserved it, but because I refused to carry that weight anymore. But sometimes I wonder if he ever understood what he lost when he drove me away. Not just me, but the possibility of real love, real partnership. His loss was my gain, Yates said, and I thank God every day that you found your way to my door. To your woodshed, Felicity corrected with a smile. To my woodshed, Yates agreed, laughing. Who would have thought that a woodshed could be the starting point for such a beautiful life? Inside the house, they heard Thomas calling for his mother, something about needing help with his schoolwork. Felicity started to rise, but Yates gently pulled her back down. Let Sarah help him, he said. Sit with me a while longer. The children will be grown and gone before we know it. I want to savor these moments while we still have them. Felicity settled back into her chair, squeezing his hand. You are right. They grow up so fast. Jamie is already talking about starting his own herd, building a house on the northern section of the property. Soon he will marry that Turner girl and we will have grandchildren running around. Grandchildren, Yates said wonderingly. Now there is a thought, though I suppose it makes sense. We are not exactly young anymore. Speak for yourself, Felicity teased. I feel like I am in my prime. You are, Yates said seriously, turning to look at her. You are more beautiful now than you were at 22, because now all that beauty comes with the knowledge of who you are, all you have survived and overcome. You are magnificent, Felicity Xander. She blushed like a girl at his words. Even after 20 years of marriage, he could still make her heart race with a look or a word. I love you, she said simply, more than words can express. I love you too, Yates replied. Always have, always will. As if on cue, the door opened and all three of their children tumbled out onto the porch, Thomas in the lead. Mama, Sarah says my arithmetic is all wrong, but I think she is the one who is wrong, Thomas announced. Let me see, Felicity said, taking the slate he thrust at her. She studied it for a moment, then looked up at Sarah with a smile. Actually, Thomas is right this time. You forgot to carry the remainder in the second problem. Sarah peered at the slate, then laughed. So I did. My apologies, Tommy. You are getting too smart for your own good. Too smart for your good, you mean? Thomas shot back, but he was grinning. Jamie, who had been leaning against the porch railing, spoke up. Pa, I wanted to talk to you about that northern pasture. I think if we clear some of the brush and build a better fence, it could support another 50 head of cattle easily. And if I am going to build a house up there eventually, it makes sense to start improving the land now. Yates nodded thoughtfully. Come find me tomorrow morning and we will ride up there together. Take a look at what needs to be done. Thanks, Pa, Jamie said, his face lighting up with enthusiasm. He was so much like Yates had been at that age, full of plans and dreams for the future. As the evening wore on, the family drifted back inside for dinner. It was a lively meal, as always, with everyone talking over each other, sharing stories of their day, making plans for tomorrow. Yates sat at the head of the table, Felicity at the other end, and watched his children with profound gratitude. This was what he had given Felicity when he offered her his coat that freezing night 20 years ago. Not just warmth or shelter, but this, the possibility of a future filled with love and family and purpose. And in return, she had given him the same thing, turning his lonely cabin into a home, his solitary existence into a life worth living. After dinner, when the dishes were washed and the children had finally settled down for the night, Yates and Felicity retreated to their bedroom. It was a comfortable space, filled with mementos of their life together. The ruby ring that had been his grandmother's sat on Felicity's dresser, too precious to wear every day now. The blue dress she had been wearing the night he found her hung in the back of the closet, mended but never thrown away, a reminder of where they had started. As they got ready for bed, Yates found himself thinking about legacy, about what they would leave behind when their time came. The ranch, certainly, and the children they had raised. But more than that, they were leaving a story of hope and resilience, of two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. "What are you thinking about?" Felicity asked, catching his contemplative expression. "About how grateful I am," Yates said. "For all of it, the struggles and the triumphs, the hard times and the good. I would not change a single moment, Felicity, even the lonely years before you, because they led me to that night in the woodshed. They led me to you." Felicity crossed the room and wrapped her arms around him. "We were both lost," she said quietly. "Both alone and incomplete in our own ways, but we found each other and we made something beautiful. That is what love does, Yates. It takes two incomplete people and makes them whole together." They climbed into bed, and Yates pulled her close, her head resting on his chest the way it had countless nights before. As he drifted off to sleep, he thought about that freezing February night 2 decades earlier, about the choice he had made to give a stranger his coat and his help, never knowing it would change both their lives forever. The years continued to roll by, bringing changes and challenges, joys and sorrows, the full spectrum of human experience. Jamie did marry Margaret Turner, and they built a house on the northern section of the property, eventually giving Yates and Felicity 4 grandchildren. Sarah married a banker from Cheyenne, a good man who appreciated her independent spirit and divided her time between town and the ranch. Thomas, surprising everyone, decided to become a veterinarian, going off to school in Colorado but always returning home for holidays and important family events. Through it all, Yates and Felicity remained the heart of the family, the foundation upon which everything else was built. They grew old together gracefully, their hair turning silver, their steps slowing, but their love never diminishing. On their 40th wedding anniversary in 1924, the whole family gathered for a celebration at the ranch. There were children and grandchildren everywhere, filling the house with noise and laughter and love. At one point during the party, Yates' oldest grandson, a boy of 15 named James after his father, approached him with a question. "Grandpa, everyone says you and Grandma have the greatest love story in Rock Springs. How did you do it? How did you stay in love for so long?" Yates looked across the room to where Felicity sat, surrounded by their children and grandchildren, her face alight with joy. She was 82 now, and he was 90, both of them well aware that their time together was growing shorter. But even after 40 years, the sight of her still made his heart skip a beat. "The secret," Yates said, turning back to his grandson, "is that we chose each other every single day. Marriage is not just one choice, it is 1,000 small choices, made again and again. We chose to forgive when forgiveness was hard. We chose to trust when trust seemed risky. We chose to see the best in each other, even on our worst days. And most importantly, we chose to be partners, true equals, working together toward common goals." Young James nodded thoughtfully. And it all started when you found her in your woodshed. It did, Yates confirmed. I gave her my coat that night to keep her from freezing. But in doing so, I gave her something much more important, a chance at a new future. And she gave me the same thing. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can change everything. I hope I find someone like that someday, James said wistfully. You will, Yates assured him. And when you do, you hold on tight and never let go. Love like that is rare and precious, worth fighting for. As the party continued around them, Yates made his way to Felicity's side. She looked up at him and smiled, that same smile that had captivated him 40 years earlier. Dance with me, Yates said, extending his hand. There is no music, Felicity pointed out, but she was already taking his hand, letting him pull her to her feet. We will make our own, Yates said, and he began to hum a waltz as he guided her in slow circles around the room. Their grandchildren watched with delight, and soon Jamie had pulled out his fiddle and began to play, providing real music for the dancing couple. As they moved together, Yates thought about the journey they had taken, from that frozen night in the woodshed to this moment, surrounded by the family they had created together. It had not always been easy. There had been losses and disappointments, moments of doubt and fear. But through it all they had each other, and that had made all the difference. I would do it all again, Yates whispered in Felicity's ear as they danced. Every single moment exactly the same way, just to end up here with you. As would I, Felicity replied, tears glistening in her eyes. You gave me everything, Yates, the life I never dreamed I could have. We gave each other everything, Yates corrected. That is what makes it perfect. Yates Xander passed away peacefully in his sleep 2 years later in the spring of 1926, at the age of 92. Felicity held his hand as he took his last breath, whispering words of love that had sustained them for 4 decades. She mourned him deeply, but she did not fall apart. She had learned long ago that she was stronger than she knew, and she honored his memory by continuing to live fully, surrounded by the family they had built together. Felicity lived another 5 years, long enough to see several of her grandchildren marry and to meet her first great-grandchild. When she finally passed away in 1931 at the age of 89, the whole town of Rock Springs mourned. She was laid to rest beside Yates on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together, with a simple gravestone that read, Felicity Harper Xander, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother. She was a survivor who became a warrior and taught us all what love really means. The ranch stayed in the family for generations, passed down from Jamie to his children and eventually to theirs. And every generation heard the story of how it all began, on a freezing winter night in 1884, when a lonely cowboy found a freezing woman in his woodshed, gave her his coat, and in doing so, gave her his future. It became a legend in Rock Springs, a reminder that the smallest acts of kindness can have the most profound consequences, and that love, when it is true and deep and freely given, can overcome any obstacle. The woodshed itself, the place where it all started, was preserved and maintained by the family, a monument to the beginning of their story. And sometimes, on cold winter nights, family members would walk out to that little building and think about Felicity, frightened and freezing, and Yates, lonely and longing for connection, and the miracle of 2 lost souls finding each other in the darkness. It was, everyone agreed, the greatest love story Rock Springs had ever known. Not because it was dramatic or grand in the conventional sense, but because it was real. 2 ordinary people, facing extraordinary circumstances, who chose each other and built a life together that lasted a lifetime and echoed through generations. And it all started with a coat, given freely on a freezing night, by a man who saw someone in need and did not hesitate to help. That simple act of compassion had rippled outward, creating waves that touched countless lives, proving that heroism is not always about grand gestures or dramatic rescues. Sometimes, it is as simple as offering your coat to someone who is cold and being willing to give them not just warmth, but hope, dignity, and the chance to build a better future. The Xander Ranch still stands today, a testament to what two people can build when they commit to loving each other completely. And the story of Yates and Felicity is still told, passed down through the generations, a reminder that even in the harshest circumstances, even when all seems lost, love can find a way. All it takes is one person willing to offer kindness and another brave enough to accept it. From such simple beginnings, everything is possible.